project planning and control, PP and C risk, execution and communication. Course 4, Module 6. Module 6, Case Study. In this final module, you'll apply everything you've learned throughout Course 5 to a realistic NASA program scenario. Using the Aurora Trace mission case study, you'll analyze cost, schedule, risk, workforce, reserve, and performance data to assess overall program health and evaluate the impact of a significant technical issue. You'll explore recovery options, consider the trade-offs among cost, schedule, and mission objectives, and develop a recommendation to support informed leadership decision-making. This module is designed to bring together the full PP and C assessment process in a practical, real-world setting. By the end of this module, you'll be able to apply the knowledge and skills developed throughout the course to a realistic program scenario. You'll learn how to evaluate cost, schedule, risk, and performance data as an integrated system, assess the impact of technical issues on program execution, and analyze recovery options using sound PP and C principles. Most importantly, you'll develop data-driven recommendations and communicate your assessment in a clear, leadership-focused manner that supports informed decision-making. Module 6 is the capstone case study, a notional NASA Class B mission that puts every analytical and communication tool from the entire 4-course pathway into a single integrated scenario. The phrase analysis meets reality in the module description is intentional. The case is designed to feel like a program you could encounter in your first week in a new PP and C role, not a textbook exercise with a clean dataset. After this module, the standard is not just about arriving at the right answer, but about explaining why each element of the assessment framework was applied and what it revealed that would otherwise have been missed. Approach Module 6 as a professional simulation. The PM is a real decision maker. Your recommendation has real consequences. That mindset is what produces the most from the exercise. Aurora Trace is a Class B science mission studying upper atmospheric energy transfer in low Earth polar orbit. 1 spacecraft, 2 instruments, 4-year development, 1 year on-orbit commissioning, with a mix of in-house and subcontracted hardware. Class B missions carry meaningful cost and schedule risk because they operate without the redundancy margins of Class A, but with the full development complexity of a science instrument program. The risk profile is concentrated. The mix of in-house and subcontracted hardware is specifically mentioned because it creates the dual analytical challenge of Module 1, understanding both the government-side budget execution and the contractor-side cost structure simultaneously. Before doing any analysis on Aurora Trace, map the subcontract relationship to the risk register. The 2 instruments are subcontracted and on the risk register. That connection is where the case study's analytical challenge lives. The Level 2 WBS for Aurora Trace, Project Management, Systems Engineering, Spacecraft Bus, Instrument A, Instrument B, INT, Launch and Commissioning and Ground System is the cost and schedule accounting framework against which all performance will be measured. 8 WBS elements at Level 2 are appropriate for a program of this complexity, granular enough to identify cost drivers, but not so detailed that management attention gets fragmented across dozens of accounts. Note that Instrument A and Instrument B are separate WBS elements, not consolidated under a single instrument line. That structure is what makes the Instrument A performance shortfall analytically visible as a distinct program problem. When performance data arrives later in the case study, always trace it back to the specific WBS element. The cost pressure is not program level. It is concentrated in specific WBS elements that the structure makes visible. The Aurora Trace total BAC of $620 million includes $520 million for development phases, 25% reserves held at the project level, and $95 million and $110 million allocated to instruments A and B, respectively. Reserves held at the project level. rather than distributed to WBS elements, is a deliberate choice. It provides the project manager with centralized flexibility to apply UFE where risks materialize, rather than having it pre-allocated to accounts that may not need it. The instrument A and B allocations together represent $205 million, roughly 39% of the development budget. That concentration means instrument performance is the dominant cost driver, not the spacecraft bus or INT. Apply the Pareto principle to the cost baseline immediately. Instruments A and B are where most of the analytical attention should be concentrated because that is where most of the cost is. CDR in March 2027. Instrument A delivery to INT in October 2027. Instrument B in December 2027. Spacecraft INT complete in August 2028. And launch readiness in January 2029. A 22-month window from CDR to launch with very limited float. The 22-month CDR to launch window is tight for a program with 2 subcontracted instruments and a dedicated INT phase. Historical data from the 114 mission NASA study suggests most scheduled growth occurs in exactly this post-CDR window. The 35 FTE INT peak and 18 FTE instrument teams define the workforce loading at the most critical phase, and those numbers will be directly relevant to the cost and schedule pressure analysis when the performance data arrives. The JCL was approved at 70% confidence with instrument development risk and late-phase INT congestion as the primary drivers. Both of those drivers are about to materialize. The case study has been structured to test exactly that. 8 months into Phase C. BCWS $180M, BCWP $160M, ACWP $170M, CPI 0.94, SPI 0.89, EAC already grown to $655M, combined with Instrument A software on the critical path, Instrument B mechanical fabrication 6 weeks late, and INT float compressed from 3 months to 4 weeks. The gap between cumulative and period performance is not shown explicitly here, but the EAC growth from $620M to $655M, a 5.6% increase in only 8 months, combined with a CPI of 0.94 and an SPI of 0.89, tells a trend story without requiring additional data. The 3 schedule signals together, critical path on software, Instrument B late, INT float burning, are more alarming in combination than any one of them individually. Each one alone might be manageable. All 3 together at month 8 is a structural concern. The combination of cost pressure, schedule degradation, and flow consumption at 8 months is not a stable condition that will self-correct. It is the beginning of a trend that the Christensen/Heise finding from Course 3 suggests is very unlikely to reverse on its own. 3 active risks are 12 Instrument A algorithm shortfall at medium likelihood and high consequence, are 19 late instrument deliveries compressing INT at high likelihood and high consequence, and are 22 specialized test facility availability at low likelihood and medium consequence. R 19 at high/high is the most immediately dangerous entry on the risk register, not because it has the largest technical consequence, but because it is the most certain to occur and will cascade directly into the most constrained part of the schedule. R 12 at medium/high is the risk that is about to transition from a probability to a fact. In the next slide, it becomes an issue. The risk register correctly identified it as significant. The question now is whether the reserves and schedule can absorb the actualized consequence. The risk register is doing its job. The risks that became problems were correctly identified and rated. This is the expected outcome of rigorous risk management. The question is not whether the risk was known, but whether the response plan was adequate. Instrument A fails to meet its signal-to-noise performance requirement during detailed design testing, and engineering identifies 2 fixes: redesign the algorithm, software-heavy, longer verification time, or modify the hardware shielding, costly, impacts mass margin. Either option will delay delivery 3 to 5 months and increase cost by $15 to $30 million. The R12 risk has transitioned from the risk register to the issues log. It is no longer a probability. It is an event requiring a decision. The analyst's role shifts from monitoring to impact assessment and support for options. The $15 to $30 cost range, added to the already grown EAC of $655 pushes the program toward $670 to $685 against a $620 back, which means reserves are being tested at 8 months in a 4-year program. That is a serious reserve posture concern. When a risk becomes an issue, the first analytical task is to quantify the range of impact connected to the baseline metrics and determine how it affects the JCL confidence level approved at Phase B. All 3 steps must be completed before the PM can make a decision. Task 1 requires identifying cost, schedule, and risk impacts using the provided data, and assessing whether current EVM trends are early indicators of a developing problem or lagging signals of something already resolved. The distinction between an early indicator and a lagging signal is the CPI stability finding from Course 3. Once a contract is more than 20% complete, the cumulative CPI typically does not increase by more than 10%. At 8 months with a $620 program, that finding is directly applicable. The answer to whether the trends are early or lagging indicators requires applying the Christensen/Heise finding explicitly. A CPI of 0.94 at roughly 25 to 30% complete suggests this is not a temporary deviation, but an early indicator of a pattern that will persist. Before writing your Task 1 analysis, list the 3 most significant data points from the performance snapshot and state in 1 sentence each what they individually and collectively imply about the program's trajectory. Task 2 requires evaluating how the Instrument A problem affects the integrated baseline, including JCL and reserves, and identifying second-order impacts such as workforce shifting and INT congestion. Second-order impacts are often more damaging than the primary problem because they are less visible and less planned for. An INT phase already compressed by float consumption becomes dramatically riskier when an instrument delivery slips by 3 to 5 additional months. The JCL assessment must be explicit. The 70% confidence level approved at Phase B is not valid at month 8 with these metrics. A new JCL run against the current performance data and the impact of Instrument A would produce a significantly lower confidence level. Write your Task 2 assessment in the format a PM can act on. Here is what the baseline looks like today. Here's what the Instrument A issue does to it. Here are the second-order effects that make the picture worse than the primary number suggests. And here is what the reserve posture now looks like against those impacts. Task 3 requires recommending one of 3 options: algorithm redesign and schedule replan, hardware fix and schedule protection, or decope of a secondary science objective, justified with integrated PP and C reasoning and presented as a PM-level story rather than a data dump. The PM-level story requirement is the Module 4 application. The recommendation must be structured from general to specific, supported by the specific data from Tasks 1 and 2, and delivered with a clear action request at the end. A recommendation without the cost schedule reserve reasoning behind it is an opinion. A recommendation with that reasoning, but without a clear PM-level message, is analysis without storytelling. Both must be present in Task 3. Structure your Task 3 output as a 3-paragraph briefing. This is the situation, this is the recommended option, and why. This is what needs to happen now. That structure is what the PM needs to make a decision. The answer key confirms that CPI below 1.0 indicates existing cost pressure. SPI below 0.9 indicates schedule degradation consistent with instrument delays. EAC growth aligns with technical risk realization rather than random variance. And reduced INT float magnifies late delivery impacts. The phrase EAC growth aligns with emerging technical risk, not random variance, which is the key analytical judgment. Random variance would produce EAC growth that does not correlate with specific programmatic events. This growth correlates directly with the instrument A risk register entry. The transition from risk to issue for instrument A is stated explicitly in the answer key. Once a risk has materialized, it requires a different analytical response than a risk that has not. The reserves, schedule, and baseline must all be reassessed against the actualized event. Compare your task 1 analysis against the answer key. The standard is not whether you reach the same conclusion, but whether you use the same evidence and applied the same analytical framework to get there. Option A, algorithm redesign, preserves science objectives and avoids mass and power margin impacts at the cost of a schedule slip. Option B, hardware fix, protects the schedule but erodes cost and mass margin. Option C, decope, protects both cost and schedule but reduces mission value and creates stakeholder risk. The answer key presents all three options fairly before making a recommendation. This is the analytical standard for evaluating options. Every option has legitimate pros and cons, and presenting them honestly is what makes the recommendation credible. The option evaluation structure, the pros and cons for each, and an explicit trade statement for each constitute the Module 4 clarity principle applied to a decision support context. The PM cannot make an informed choice without seeing the trade-offs stated plainly. Use the answer key option evaluation structure as a template for future option analysis. The format, option name, pros, cons, and implicit trade are replicable across any program decision context. Option A, with an integrated replan, is the recommended choice. Update the schedule logic, rebaseline the critical path, apply targeted reserve informed by the updated risk analysis, and maintain scientific value while restoring baseline credibility. The key message to the PM is that the issue is manageable, but the current baseline is no longer realistic. A controlled replan now is lower risk than protecting an unachievable launch date. Is the Tom Newman standard applied? Clear, direct, convincing, and actionable? The recommendation does not pretend to eliminate the problem. It frames the problem as manageable with a specific response, acknowledges the cost to the baseline, and clearly states the risk of the alternative. That honesty is what makes it credible. Read this key message 3 times. It is the model for every difficult assessment briefing in a PP&C career. Here is what happened. Here is what it means for the baseline. Here is the best available path forward. And here is why the alternative is worse. That structure works in every program context. 3 questions test the integration competency, reading a compound signal, assessing JCL validity against current data, and defining the analyst's role boundary in an options trade. Q1 asks for what the combination tells you that any individual signal does not, which requires the integrative analytical skill that the entire 4-course pathway has been building toward. Q3 is the boundary question. Your role is to translate options into impacts on cost, schedule, and reserve. What is not your role is making the technical engineering judgment about which fix is better or the mission science judgment about whether decoping is acceptable. Know where the line is. These 3 questions should be the last analytical exercise before the course is complete. If you can answer all 3 with confidence and specificity, you have achieved the learning objectives of the entire PP and C certification pathway. This is the close of Course 4 and the PP and C certification pathway. You have now covered the full discipline, from building an executable baseline in Courses 1 and 2, to reading program performance in Course 3, to managing risk, contracts, budget execution, and communication in Course 4. The reason this certification pathway is structured in this sequence is the same reason programs fail when they skip steps. You cannot assess what you did not plan. You cannot control what you did not baseline. You cannot communicate what you did not analyze. The sequence is the discipline. You can now Read a contractor's financial reports and identify what the numbers are actually saying about labor, overhead, ODCs, and fee. Interpret contract types and where cost risk sits. Apply the budget execution cycle from commitment through disbursement. Use a structured checklist framework to interrogate funding, cost, workforce, schedule, reserves, and trends. Deliver an assessment briefing that meets the Tom Newman standard and apply integrated PP&C analysis to a realistic program. Scenario under pressure. The certification is the credential. The capability is what you build getting here. Take this into the programs you support and use it to move from data reporter to strategic partner. That is what 40 years at JPL and Lockheed Skunk Works taught me. The only version of this work that earns a permanent seat at the table.